All right, folks. Well, thank you, Dr. Lee, for the introduction, and thank you all for having us. A little bit about me before we begin. So I was born and raised in Northeast Pennsylvania, actually, and grew up in Sweet Valley, Pennsylvania, about 25 minutes away from your campus. Graduated of Lake Lehman High School in 2000. I played semi-professional golf from 02 to 06. That allowed me to basically get into the hospitality program and hospitality programs throughout the East Coast. I went to college at Siena and then Pittsburgh and then Le Cordon Bleu. So I do have a culinary and hospitality degree as well as a business degree. And that let me work at Augusta National, Pinehurst, Oakmont Country Club, the Crescent Club in Memphis, Tennessee. So I've lived all over the East Coast. Most recently, I spent just over 2 years at the Westmoreland Club, a couple blocks away from you. Under Robert Williams, was the clubhouse manager there for about 2 years. Under that tutelage and guidance, we became one of the top 100 city clubs in the world while I was there. Transitioned out here to Green Bay, Wisconsin to run Green Bay Country Club and take on my own GM experience. And then right before the pandemic hit, I came here to Von Stiehl Winery. So I am a level 1 SOM. It was a good transition process to go from there to here. So what we're going to do is kind of just walk you through our facility. We are the oldest licensed winery in the state of Wisconsin. We were founded in 1967 by Doc Stiehl. We're going to walk through the production building first, which is Alley. We have 2 buildings here on the property, so we have a rather large footprint. We are the second largest commercial winery in the state of Wisconsin. So Alley is actually standing in called the wall. So these barrels can go up to about 3 or 4 stories high. We have roughly 60 to 70 barrels over in our production facility now. So these barrels are a mix of what's called French and American hybrids, or just French barrels too. Most of what we use are French hybrid barrels, basically meaning that the staves or the sides are the American oak, and then we use French heads or caps. Reason being is it gives us the best of both worlds, gives us a little bit of vanilla smoke flavor to them. These are what's called char level 3, so medium fire char. It goes about a ½ inch to 1 inch deep into the wood. With that, again, vanilla, good smoke, essence to it, spice. Now lets the wine breathe a little bit. Typically, we age our wines in oak, generally a medium of about 8 months to a year or longer. We have some wines that have been in casks for 2 to 3 years. So big question we get, where do we source our fruit since we're in Northeast Wisconsin? Well, we get most of our grapes from California and Washington, Red Mountain AVA in Washington, which is in the Columbia Valley AVA, as well as Sierra Foothills, which is just east of Sacramento. So Lodi, Encino, places like that. We've sourced some fruit from New York, which is mostly white wines. And then the fruit that we use for ciders all come from Wisconsin and Michigan. So the wines that you're looking at here is a mix of Cabernet. There should be some Mourvèdre in there, Syrah, Alicante, Bouchette. Most of that all comes from California and Washington. So Allie, if you want to go into the actual production side. So on the left-hand side, when she's walking through, these are recycled dairy tanks. So we pride ourselves in doing everything from in-state as much as we can. These tanks are what we use to cold stabilize almost every single wine that we have. So most of the reds and whites will take down to 28 degrees after they're made to stabilize them. We'll put in bentonite, which is a clay powder, which helps pull out proteins, sediments, things like that. We want it to be as clean of a wine as possible. What you're looking at here is our tank room. So this tank room, basically where we make all the wine, there are 67 tanks. It is 2 stories high. So the tank in the foreground when she walked in, it's a 5,000 gallon tank, floor to ceiling. It's basically a full 2 stories high. Crazy thing is we produce about 110,000 gallons of wine a year, and we need more and bigger tanks. So we're kind of maxed with the 67 tanks that we have now. That is by far the largest. We're looking at getting probably 3 or 4 more of those. Behind it, if you see on the wall and the catwalk there, those are 3,000 gallon tanks. We have, I believe, 5, 6, or 7 of those that all go down through the back wall there. Now, the cool thing within these is because we are a state-of-the-art winery, you're going to see that most of these tanks are jacketed. So the bubbled areas on the tanks, both top and bottom, these are all temperature controlled. So every single tank that we have is hooked up to our lab to an individual control module. That if we want the tank to be fermented at 58 degrees, we can set it and forget it. If it changes by a degree, it sends a text message to our winemaking team, basically to our head winemaker, and he can come in and change it, re-alter it. Maybe fermentation is going too fast and the temperature is elevated, so we'll need to back it off a little. Or maybe it's taking a little bit longer and we need to increase the temperature to get through fermentation. Again, we can control every single step of the way of it. Allie, if you want to cruise to the right, over to the lab. Yay, so this is our lab. So the winemaking process is highly a chemical process. It really is. It's a scientific process, especially when you want to finish off the wines. So every wine that we make gets tested and or blended in this area. And then behind her on the wall is the control modules. I think Chad is back there, so we might be trying to keep him out of the video. Hi, Chad. There you go. So Chad's our assistant winemaker. So these are the control modules that every single tank is hooked up to during the winemaking process. And like I said, we can control every individual tank that we need to based on temperature that way. So if you want to go back to the right, Molly, or Allie, and then go back into the production facility here. So like I said, all of these tanks are made in Wisconsin except a handful. So the tanks on to the right here, these short red wine fermentation tanks, these are custom made in Italy for us. There's only a handful of them. We do Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, Dolcettos. We do a good amount of Italian varietal red wines. All of them are fermented in here. The beauty of these is it allows us to do what's called pump overs. Basically pump the wine from the bottom of the tank up back to the top. What happens during fermentation is all the skins and sediment and things like that will rise to the top and they'll create a cap. That cap will get hard enough that a 250-pound person can walk across the top. So we need to constantly pump the wine back over, usually 2 to 3 times a day, to re-soak it, re-aerate the wine. That allows a lot of the natural flavors to come out of the skins and the grapes themselves. So we have a handful of those. And then Allie, if you want to swing behind you, I think the cross flow is behind you.
Anthony, just give me a moment. Okay, everybody, please click the speaker view. I think there is some reason I cannot highlight the Anthony's in the screen. So please click the speaker's view on the right top. Then you guys can see the the bigger screen for the the tour. Thank you. I'm sorry that Anthony, you can go ahead.
No, you're okay.
Sorry.
So what Allie has here in frame is this is what's called a cross flow machine. So like I said, we're a state-of-the-art winemaking facility. This is what filters about 98% of the wines that we do. So if you're familiar with water filtration and things like that, this operates like a reverse osmosis machine. There are 3 tubes that are about 4 feet tall. Inside of each tube is about 10,000 micron or 10,000 filters that can get down to 0.2 microns inside of there. So any sediment, dirt, debris, bacteria, we can pull through these machines. This machine is self-cleaning, so it basically runs itself. We can just hit play, it'll filter it. Once it starts clogging, it'll reverse the flow, unclog itself, and then start right back over where it was. Once all the wine is through, we can set it on its own cleaning process. Our guys can walk away. Highly effective, highly efficient, and it allows us to work on multiple projects at once. In the past, we had what was called a pad filter system. It's basically 10 or 12 pads that the wine gets pushed through. We'd only be able to filter maybe 200 gallons an hour. With the cross flow, we can do 700, 800 gallons, sometimes more, depending on how fast they want to push it. So Allie, if you want to go to the bottling line. So again, once we bring the wines in, we crush, we press, we ferment, the wine is ready to go. Then we go over here. So this is basically our bottling line. So our bottling line was made by Borelli. They are a company in Italy. It is a custom-made bottling line specifically for us. This was the first like it in the US. It was the first like it in Wisconsin. And it's an isobaric bottling line. So we can bottle under pressure and under carbonation. Right now, we're only one of 2 in the state that can do it. But basically, we are bottling today. So you see Stephanie checks every single bottle by hand when it comes off the line. But what you're looking at is the front. So the bottles go on here. They'll go around a curve, get loaded into the machine where Steph is, and the bottles will be basically cleaned and sparged. So they'll be rinsed with water. Nitrogen then goes into the bottle under pressure, pushes all the water out, sparges it, gets rid of all the bacteria and air. So the bottles they're basically bottled under pressure, always in a constant vacuum. Again, the less air we let touch the wine at this point, the longer it can hold, basically. So once the bottles get sparged, then they go into the filling machine. The filling machine, all of the wine gets pumped from the room we were just in over, and then gets filled in. So we use 750 bottles. They're the standard wine bottles. They're 25 ounces. But we can bottle 180 or 387s, 500 milliliters, as well as bigger magnums if we need to. Once they're filled in that machine, then they go to what you're looking at here is the caps. So we can do 3 different caps. We can do what's called a crown cap, which is your basic beer bottle cap. We can do a screw-on cap, which is what we do for our hard ciders and any carbonated product that we do. The beauty of those is, we can open them, reseal them tight, and that wine will keep another 3, 4, or 5 weeks. Our record so far is 65 days, so we're working to elongate that if we can. And then the third enclosure we have is what's called a Noma cork. So it's a 100% plant-based sustainable cork. We do not use real cork anymore. The plant-based works just as well. Plus, we believe in sustainable efforts, so this lowers the carbon footprint for us as well. Once they get their enclosure, then they go down to the next machine. So they get bottle rinsed here. This is an air knife that basically blows off or dries the bottles, then goes into foil capsules and then labels. So this machine will put the cap basically on it. So all of our bottles have a foil cap. So it basically blows it on, crimps it, makes it seal tight, and then it'll push it over to the label maker or the label machine. Everything gets rolled on here. So we have a roll-on press. So once they get labeled, then they leave that, then they go to Steph. So basically Stephanie stands right here. So this is our taper and labeler for the boxes. So she'll take every bottle, touch them by hand, make sure there's no leaks or chips in the glass or cracks or anything like that. Make sure it's tight seal. She'll put them in the boxes, then goes through the taper. That machine will label it date, time. So if there's an issue with a case or a bottle, we can go back to the time and basically generally part of the day when they were bottled. And if there's any issues, we can track down the cases to who it went, did they go to M. Shiraz or one of our other distributors, and we can go ahead and correct it from there. So again, top of the line, state-of-the-art facility that we have. That bottling line can do upwards of 700 to 800 bottles or 700, 800 cases a day. The record is 1,465, which I don't know if we're going to be breaking that anytime soon. That's basically bottling from 6 a.m. to 3:30, 4 p.m. Our normal bottle schedule is from 6 a.m. to about 11, 11:30, and they'll break for lunch. We'll start at 12:30 and usually done by 1:30 or 2 o'clock. That bottling line has to be cleaned every time we use it. So it's about an hour and a half to 2 hour cleanup process. The other thing that's in that building that we really can't see, but it's all the way in the front of your frame. Again, we believe in being sustainable. So we make our own oxygen, we make our own nitrogen, and we actually make our own carbon dioxide. All the 3 main gases that we need. The CO2 pressurizes everything. So that line, again, everything is under pressure. The O2 machine is basically a hospital grade O2. So that's our cleaning agent. So every night that will get mixed with a little bit of water. It'll get sprayed throughout the facility. That's our sanitation measure. So it kills every ounce of bacteria in our production facility. Every night it cycles at about 11 or 12 o'clock. And then the nitrogen we use to help sparge the bottles, as well as sparge on our tasting room side here. So any bottle that we open, we'll hit it with some nitrogen at the end of the day, recork it, and it's good to go for tomorrow. So again, we don't have to buy the gas. We don't have to pay for the trucks to get delivered. We're taking trucks effectively off the road. So anything we can do to lower the carbon footprint. So it's kind of a quick walkthrough, but that's the basic walkthrough of our production facility. Again, the big thing is 67 tanks, about 110,000 gallons of wine a year. That's 45,000 cases. And that's growing. We're predicting basically to do about 120 to 130,000 gallons this year, almost 50,000 cases, maybe north of that, depending on summer volume. So we're growing at a rate of about 12% every year. So thank you, Ali, for handling the camera across the street. So now we'll come over to our tasting room side, which is about a block away. And hopefully you don't cut out. I know that the Wi-Fi works a little bit in these cellars. So this is where everything gets aged. So the wine is made, fermented, goes through bottling lines. But before it gets that mid spot, before we bottle, all of our high-end reds or red wines are aged in these limestone cellars. These cellars are about 150 years old. They're Civil War era, just like our building. Our building was built in 1868. Normally, this cellar is filled with barrels. Again, we're bottling today, so the room I'm in is typically filled with barrels. Those are across the street. But if you look all the way in the back in the second part of the cellar, we have additional red wine barrels back there getting done. There's some Mourvedre back there. There's some Cab, Alicante Bouchette as well as back there, some Syrah. And we have some Barbera and Tyrol to go back there too. But basically, these are our cellars. They're 150-year-old limestone cellars. We age all red wines. Basically, anything that goes in cask goes down here. From what you did see, we had some tables set up. So we do events down here. We do basically what's called tunnel tastings. So our higher end red wines, the big cabs from California, some of the big red Italians that we do from California fruit, people can book the space and come down and we do tastings down here. So we're going to go up to the old shipping room. So this is the basement. Our building's about 5 stories. All right. So I apologize for looking a little disheveled. So we're getting ready for our summer. So May 21st, our cider bar opens, which is why we're doing the big work. But we also age some wines in this area. So this spot used to actually be the old room that they made the wine in. So we had the drain in the floor. So when the winery first started in 1967, Doc Stiehl would actually make the wines in here, and that lasted up until about the 80s before they shifted them downstairs and then over. But this spot, we put all of our very, very big and high-end reds. So if you look at here, so this is Sierra Foothills, Mariposa Cab. So these are big cabs. Behind the board, we have Howell Mountain. So Napa cabs, we were lucky enough to get some Napa fruit. So we have Napa Cab in 3 different casks. Trying to do an experiment between Gamba barrels, the reduced French hybrids, and what's called O barrels. So big taste difference, pretty cool experiment. So if we go across the side here. So this space is our shipping space. Every e-com purchase or any purchase that we ship all comes out of here. This is only a fraction of the wine. So the wines that are stored in here are basically just the sweeter wines. The single varietals are stored in a completely separate room to help control the temperature a little bit more. But again, every order that we process comes through here. Holiday boxes, shipments to Pennsylvania. We actually just started shipping to Pennsylvania 3 weeks ago. So if you like what you see and you want to order wine, let's talk. Behind the curtain, we're not going to go through there, but that's kind of inner workings. So that's our storage. It's the back bar to our outside cider bar. Some of the single varietals in our sister winery, Captain's Walk wines, are all stored in there. We go up to the tasting room. And this is second level. We're going to go up to the third. So this is the tasting room. So this is exactly how it was basically since 1967. Some minor modifications like windows and things like that, but the interior of this is as far back as the 1868. Not a lot has changed. We believe in history. We believe in honoring our roots. So there are no plans to change and super modernize this. So our tasting bar basically wraps all the way around the room. So we try to provide, we believe in the experience. That's part of hospitality, right? So we believe in trying to provide the best experience possible and a more personal experience. So during COVID, as you can imagine, we had to pivot and change what we do. So on the tasting bar here, you'll see these black windows that we basically created as sneeze guards. So our staff can stand on this side on the back bar. They'll serve wines and cups on these trays. They'll slide the trays forward, and the guests can take them from underneath the window and sample the wines that way. Trying to be as safe as we possibly can, still sanitize everything about 2 hours, give or take, or immediately after that they're done. So again, a couple small pivots. Every bar used to be its own little station. So we had 4 tasting stations. What we had to do was switch. So we have 8 of these windows. So we have 8 tasting spots. We rotate 8 wines basically every 2 weeks. We have over 90 different wines. So we have to rotate every 2 weeks to keep it fresh and let everybody taste new things. Being that we're the oldest licensed winery in the state of Wisconsin, we're also the most award-winning winery in Wisconsin. Our Riesling is the big one. Sweet cherry is kind of where it all started back in '67. That gets an award almost every year. Most recently, we have Sierra Foothills Cabernet that was rated at 92 points. Our Riesling's at 87 points, and we're looking to increase those ratings to everything in the 90s. We will be rated by Robert Parker as well in the next few months, so excited to see where that falls. But in a nutshell, this is the tasting room. We're going to go upstairs. Cool artwork and mural on the wall. In the 80s and 90s, there used to be a group of artists and painters that lived and worked in Algoma. So if you ever do come to Algoma, Wisconsin, or if you look at pictures online, you're going to see a ton of murals on sides of buildings. It was kind of like a little conglomerate or collective that they did together. They no longer exist, unfortunately. So on our production building, you can't see it from here. We have one of the last outside murals painted on there. So it's pretty cool. If you look up Algoma, Wisconsin, that one is trout fishery or salmon fishery from some of the charters that are right on their back step. It was the last one that was done. But if you search Algoma, Wisconsin, that picture usually pops up. So up here, this is what we consider the lounge. So this is our 4th floor. There is an attic and 5th floor above us that we're not going to go to. There's nothing up there. But we basically sell this space or book this space out for private events, private tastings, groups, wedding receptions, bridal parties, you name it. The corporate offices are up here too. So my office, the accountant, Molly, our marketing manager, who's actually holding the camera. Thank you, Molly.
Hi.
Is up here. Our whole marketing team basically is up here. So like I mentioned, we have 2 wineries. This is the corporate office. This is the main winery. We do all of the production here. Our sister winery is Captain's Walk in Green Bay. We also make wine for Harbor Ridge, Red Oak Winery. We bottle a little bit for Door Pen. We make ciders for Orchard Country, Lautenbach, Apple Holler that's outside of Milwaukee. So we do a lot of other production, not just our own. So in a nutshell, that's our facility. It is beautiful outside, but I think if we go outside, we're probably going to lose you. But you might be able to see kind of our view. So we're unique in Wisconsin. We are the only winery in Wisconsin and Michigan that's actually on Lake Michigan. So our backside here, this is all the Anape River, and literally about 200 to 300 yards north, that's Lake Michigan. So we have charters that go through here, a lot of people that come through in canoe. Really cool spot, great view. Our terrace right here that basically you're looking at, we have a tent that has a cider bar. We put tables outside and people can come out and enjoy music. We do live music on Fridays and Saturdays. That'll start mid-June. And there'll be about 500 or 600 people in our lawn right here, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. You may have also seen us on what's called Man versus Food. So we have a giant barbecue pit that we roast about a 700-pound steer on. That event's every June. Unfortunately, we had to cancel it this year and last year due to COVID. We're looking forward to doing it again next year. But what happens is there's Anape Brewery is 2 buildings down. It's just a tasting room now. But they take spent beer grains, feed it to this steer. When the steer is slaughtered, then we marinate it in red wine. A special concoction or blend that we do changes every year. And then once it's marinated, we bring it out, cook it overnight. I think it takes them about 12 or 14 hours to spitfire it. And then, we serve it the next day for, I think they said 1,000 or 1,100 people. I haven't experienced it yet. I'm looking forward to doing it next year, but that's basically us in a nutshell. So, put it down.